I just ask that we make our ears good and that we direct attention to our program. I would like to invite Gary Parker to sing a song to gather us to order. Gary Parker, please. If we could give Gary a warm welcome. I'd like to ask Grandmother Marie Jones to start us off with a traditional Thanksgiving.
Yahweh. Sego ze wagwego, gachichigelo yungats, waganyakto, yayak de honjage, ganyagahaga. My spirit name is Gajichigelu, my English name is Marie Jones. I'm Mohawk, Turtle Clan, and I was born in the Six Nations territory. As a Haudenosaunee woman, what we do when we gather together like this, whether there's just two of us or whether there's a whole room full of us, we always say words before all else to set the pace and to remind us to walk in that gratitude, just like we did at that sunrise ceremony this morning. We gave thanks when our brother the sun, we greeted them. When we start with the people, always with the people, acknowledging you, that each and every one of you, that you're here in this circle, even though we're not in a circle, right? We'll pretend it's a circle, one big circle. And acknowledge that there's a lot of heaviness today that we carry because of what this day reminds us of. And at the same time, acknowledge the love that each and every one of you brought with you as well. Everything that us individually, what we bring to this circle. Agwego aska andida wahnoni ne gwat ni gola dano de tino walaro ne ohonde suha. Tonio duhak ne gwat ni gola. So that's what I said in Mohawk, is acknowledging the people. And then at the end, before I go into the next spirit that we're talking about, because we are all spirits, all of creation is spirit. All of our minds come together as one to bring that unity and that strength. Our love, compassion, kindness is going to be put in a big heap here, and we are going to have a ginormous one that we are going to send up to Sungwayandiso, the creator of all things, to show him how grateful we are that we are here, and that as Indigenous people, we are still here. We turn and look to our mother, the earth, who is our original mother, who is not well either, just like none of us are well as we should be, right? She's sick. She thinks at times we forgot about her, yet she's the one who provides absolutely everything in creation that we have, everything. And so we bring all of our minds together as one, and one of my elders, Ernie Benedict, he would say, as that smoke rises from that fire, as we put our sacred tobacco on there, and let that smoke pierce the sky and go directly. We have a direct connection to our Creator. He's there wherever we go, and He listens to us and knows, and we just use our sacred tobacco, and He hears us. We acknowledge all of the harvesting that's going on right now. Everyone's going and collecting and getting our corn, beans, and squash, and I'm picking my tobacco, and we're canning our tomatoes and getting ready for this hard winter that we know is coming because of the food shortage and because of the lack of rain and everything else that's happening out there in creation. We acknowledge all of the water that flows within her, that blood life, those veins that flow within her. And we acknowledge that sacredness of that water, that gift of life, that we cannot live without that water. And to know that we are our own sacred bundle. We are our own walking bundle with that water, that sacred water within us. The power of this water that we're next to here. We acknowledge the water in all forms, whether it's that raindrop that comes when you see the dew on the leaves, to the ponds, rivers, streams, lakes, oceans, all waters. We acknowledge and we give thanks. We look at that, what's in that water, all that fish, and they have their own ecosystem. They have their own way to look after each other in that water. And they also know that their job, just like we have roles and responsibilities, everything out there has a responsibility as well. But we are the only ones that seem to forget what our roles are. And as a people, when we come together like this, that's what we're doing. We're relearning and repracticing and making that happen. And those fish know that they are our sustenance. They give their lives so that we can survive. So we acknowledge all of that life within that water and say, Nyawagoa, a big thank you. All the medicines out there, everything that we need, all the medicines are provided for us, and all we have to do is go out there. And again, as a people relearning our ways, there are so many medicines out there to learn. You see those trees there, you just know that there's medicines up in there. And we give our tobacco, and I tell that tobacco who I am when I go out there in that woods, what I'm out here for and what I need that for. And as I walk around and I see the tobacco, the medicine that I'm looking for, I'm not going to pick that one, because what if that's the very only one there? I have to make sure that there's more for the 7 generations to come. So I'm going to go around, and probably maybe the 3rd one is the one I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick that medicine. So the leader of those strawberries, the leader of those medicines is that strawberry, and we had those at that fire this morning. All of our segments, or I'm not sure what to call them, they all have leaders. Some people say, oh, we have our little chiefs. We have chiefs of everything. And so the strawberry is the leader of that, of all those medicines. And then we look at all the animals, all the life from the very, very tiny, tiny insects that you might need a magnifying glass to see, to the bigger ones, that 4-legged one, that deer, the leader of those animals, who also gives its life to us for our sustenance, to carry our medicines, to wear as beautiful jewelry, to use those antlers in our lodge to help those grandfathers. We use every part of the animals. We don't waste anything. And so we acknowledge, and we bring all our minds together as one and acknowledge all of the animal life out there. And then we turn and look at these beautiful, beautiful trees here. And that tree drew me. I was going to come up this side, and I walked over there. And as I'm standing there, I could feel it, because that's a cedar tree, right? That's a cedar tree there, and that makes our medicines. And it's those trees that give us that very oxygen, that breath that we share with each other. We share the same breath because of those trees. It's giving you shade from that sun. And right now it's nice, you know, like the sun's shining, I feel a breeze, and it's good. In the north, they're changing color rapidly. And as Haudenosaunee, we have stories that go with why those leaves are red and why these ones are yellow and all of that. We have all those stories. And those trees will tell us when the seasons are changing, just like those winds do. And when the winter is coming near an end, those trees, that sap water, that sweet water will start running, right? They'll start running from the top down. And we tap that tree, we drink that water, we drink that medicine, and we give thanks again. The trees support each other. They talk to each other because they are spirit, just like everything else is spirit. They are spirit as well. And if that tree needs something, this tree over here will send it to them through their roots, even though it's a different kind of tree. It doesn't matter, well, you're not a maple, or they don't care, right? They're trees and they support each other, which is what we're doing here right now. We're trees, we're supporting each other. It doesn't matter what direction of that medicine wheel we're from. We're here for one cause. And we give thanks to that tree life, who not only helped us have that sacred fire this morning with that wood, but also helps build our homes and their homes for the animals as well. So we acknowledge the sacredness of those trees, especially that poplar tree who gives its life for Sundance, for not all our people, but certain nations of people to do their Sundance ceremonies, and those trees give its life for that also. So we acknowledge that. And like we heard this morning, for those that were here in the east is, I think, this way. In the east, our brother, the sun, as a Haudenosaunee woman, that's our brother, rises faithfully every day without being reminded, without being told. Even when they change the clocks and the time and all of that, they still come up when it's time to come up. But don't say, oh, they changed the clocks, now I don't have to come back up for another hour, or I get to rest for another hour. They just automatically do it. And I'm told that when he reaches kind of like right above us, he actually stops and pauses and looks around just to admire. I'm also told the warmth that you feel from that sun right now is Songwayan Diso himself reaching out with his love and touching you. That's why it feels so good, and that's why it's so warm. This eagle feather, the eagle flies closest to the Creator, and he is the leader of all those birds. The job and responsibility of those birds is to bring joy and happiness to us when we hear them very early in the morning. And it is a beautiful sound. They have their own orchestra, and they do lift our minds, and we say, Nyawagoa. Our grandmother, the moon out there, who is our nighttime sun, she is there for each and every one of us all the time. She was there when you were born, each and every one of us, because she not only takes care of the tides within the ocean, she takes care of those tides within us, of when those babies will come. And when a woman is ready to go into labor, that water, that sacred water breaks, goes onto the earth, and it's announced, this new life is coming. So the water talks, the trees talk, the airs talk, the birds talk. All we have to do is give her water and say to her, pray to her, ask to put her medicine in that water, and we have it. We have that medicine at our very fingertips anytime we want it. It doesn't have to be full. The moon doesn't have to be full. And then we turn our minds together as one to the stars out there. The star, that Milky Way, we come from that star life, and when we leave this earth walk, that's where we're going to return. That's where we're going to return to. And we acknowledge all of that. We acknowledge these winds, these four winds. We acknowledge our ancestors that are with us all the time. Justin, I wanted to say to you, when we were in that circle there and there were empty chairs there, those were the survivors that could not be here. Manenus, who's fishing along that river further down right now because he could not be here because it's just a little too much. And so we acknowledge all of creation and all the beings. And I know that I've left out many because this is a Reader's Digest version. My good friend and elder Sago Gonukwas, I says, you know, sometimes I just can't remember it all sometimes because I don't speak the language, right? And so you lose a lot of it. Like you lose a lot of the translation of the depth of what's being said. And I said, sometimes they say, okay, go talk and you have 2 minutes, right? And he says, Kajit Jagelu. He says, in that case, he says, you say, Nyawagoa dagyati, so what kotnawalado. And that's a big thank you to He who made me, thanking for absolutely everything. So that's what we do at this time, is we bring our minds together as one and acknowledge something that I have forgotten. Songwayan Diso, the creator of all things, who has provided for us, and all he asks in return is our gratitude. And we are sending our gratitude right now in that heap that I talked about. It's a ginormous heap of love, kindness, and compassion and gratitude that we are sending up to him. Yahweh, Danito.
And Yahweh Marie for starting us off in a good way. I would like to invite Melissa Gray and Elizabeth Grimmond from the Niagara Falls Diversity and Inclusion Committee to come up and to give the land acknowledgement. Well, let's make them feel welcome too. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Bonjour, Ani, Sego, Scano, bonjour, hello. My name is Melissa Gray, and I'm a white settler, born and raised here in a place now called Niagara Falls, Canada. I'm grateful for this opportunity to sincerely thank the First Peoples, Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Haudenosaunee, for their ongoing stewardship of these lands. We gather today on their traditional lands, knowing many other First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people also reside here now. This area of Turtle Island is part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, the Royal Proclamation, the Treaty of Niagara, and the Upper Canada Treaties. This is a sacred gathering place. We all have a responsibility as treaty people, as settlers in Canada, to learn and act beyond a land acknowledgement. Learn the history that provides us with this rich and blessed life today. Act where injustices are present. Thank you to Phyllis and your family for sharing your story. And thank you to all the survivors, dependents, and their families for your strength and perseverance. Miigwech, Nyawe, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Kerman. I immigrated to Canada from one of the colonies, British Guyana, 47 years ago. I'm also a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the City of Niagara Falls. Every time I hear the land acknowledgement, it reminds me that there were people here before me, people who have paved a way for me to be who I am, living on lands that have afforded me growth and success. It also reminds me of hardship, suffering, and cruelty that they endured, and reinforces why I need to show respect for those who were here before me. Today in particular, let us remember and honor the children who never came home. Children who survived unimaginable trauma, their families and their communities. I believe all children are the future. Let us show them the beauty that they possess inside. Let us give them a deep sense of pride to navigate on their own, for they all matter. The Diversity and Inclusion Committee of Niagara Falls would like you to embrace the truth and reconcile. It involves fostering the truth of being respectful to each other, caring for each other, and most of all, taking time to understand and value each other. We ask that you stand, please. Turn to the person to the right of you or the left of you. Look that person in the eye and say 3 words. Count on me.
Count on me.
Thank you.
I want to acknowledge how they took the land acknowledgement and they turned that into action. So it wasn't just words, it wasn't just about the history, but they said let's do an act of good. Let's do something to make our community better. So thank you very much to the committee for those powerful words. I want to acknowledge that we have the CEO of the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres, Gertie May Muse, here from the Mi'kmaq Nation. Thank you so much for joining us, Gertie May. I want to acknowledge the work of Wendy Sturgeon and the Niagara Chapter of Native Women. Wendy is not available to be with us today, but without our community organizations, we wouldn't have the strength that we have in our communities. So I want to acknowledge Wendy Sturgeon. I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge the Executive Director of the Forgery Native Friendship Center, who will be joining us shortly, and all of her team members that are here as well. Thank you, Jennifer Dockstader and the Forgery Native Friendship Center. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the Niagara Regional Native Center. We have a board of matriarchs. We are led by completely women that run that Friendship Center. Bobby Jones, Jap, is here from the board of directors. Nyamakoa. Thank you to all the staff of the center as well for being here. I'd like to take this opportunity to have one more ask. If I could ask all of the Indigenous people in the crowd to rise right now. Residential school did not work. It was a failure. We are successful. We as Indigenous people. This is what this is about today. This is why you're here, Prime Minister Trudeau. This is what you're here to see. We're here. We're going to stay here. We can continue to be strong. Can we give a hand to all of the strength in the Indigenous community? Nyamakoa. I would like to acknowledge the Mayor of Niagara Falls and ask him to join us and share some words. Mayor Jim Diodati.
Thank you very much, Carl, and welcome everyone to Niagara Falls. You know, I'm very blessed that I get to bring greetings on behalf of the city of Niagara Falls, and we're not always understood. You know, people don't realize we are actually a city of citizens, not just a tourist destination. We happen to be the #1 tourist destination in Canada with 20 million visits a year, and what an appropriate place to celebrate and to have the ceremony of truth and reconciliation, a place that everybody in the world understands and recognizes. It's an honor to be here with all of you here today to witness the testimony of our friends in the Indigenous community and to hold space for their stories and history. Welcome to all Indigenous community members who join us here today, and can we once again thank all of them for making the journey here to Niagara. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the dignitaries, and one in particular, our Prime Minister Trudeau, for making the trip to be here to show the importance this is to him. Thank you, Prime Minister, for being here today. And I do want to acknowledge he's got some very cool orange socks on today too, so check that out when you get a chance, as he always does. I'd also like to acknowledge what a treasure it was meeting Phyllis Webstad. You know, I was able to have lunch with Phyllis the other day and hear her stories, and what an incredible human being that started this whole orange movement that's going global, and what a place to launch from Niagara Falls to the rest of the world. Can we please acknowledge the incredible woman, Phyllis Webstad. Her moving experiences were just incredible. What a humble individual, and she brings all of her family with her, and we're really grateful that she made the journey. This event, of course, is appropriately named Beyond the Orange Shirt. And as I said earlier, meeting and listening to Phyllis added a level of, for me, personal understanding. To hear her story told right from the heart was so special that everybody felt changed once we heard the compassion, the experience, and of course the horrible situation with the residential schools that they had to endure. It brings us there, and it allows us to connect in a way that, of course, books just don't do. When you can hear it directly from source, it's so much more important, so much more organic, and it has much more meaning and a place in all of our hearts. So Phyllis, thank you for sharing these unbelievable stories. So we're here today for you, Phyllis, and As we stand by you and as we continue, all of you, to give your personal testimony, tonight I'm happy to acknowledge that we will once again be illuminating the falls in orange at the top of every hour from 8 p.m. as a sign and as a signal to the rest of the world that we're all a participant in truth and reconciliation. It's not us and them, it's simply us. Thank you very much.
I would like to welcome the chair of the Niagara Parks Commission, April Jeffs, to the stage. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Carl. And good morning, and thank you all for being here with us today to mark this important occasion as we gather to recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Merci d'être ici aujourd'hui alors que nous soulignons la Journée nationale de la vérité et de la réconciliation. I am April Jeffs, Chair of the Niagara Parks Commission, and I would like to issue a very warm welcome on behalf of our entire organization to all in attendance. I would like to begin by taking a moment to express our gratitude to a few of the individuals who we are so honored to have present with us here today. Phyllis Webstad has lived a remarkable life, and one that has included painful experiences and injustices. However, Phyllis stands here with us today as a survivor, an ambassador, and an inspiration to millions of Canadians. The courage and determination that Phyllis has demonstrated in creating and championing the Orange Shirt Day initiative is a testament to her remarkable character and unyielding determination. By drawing upon her own lived experiences to bring attention to the atrocities of the Canadian residential school system, Phyllis has made an incredible impact on the social fabric of our country, and one that will leave a lasting legacy for future generations of Canadians. To put it simply, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation would not exist today without the work of Phyllis Webstad, and we are so honored to have her here with us. So thank you so much, Phyllis. The gravity of this day and its importance to Canadians is further demonstrated this morning by the presence of our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, who will be providing remarks shortly. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for being here and for your support this day. I know that it is greatly appreciated. Both Phyllis and Prime Minister Trudeau are here with us thanks to the efforts of Brian Kahn. Brian has worked tirelessly to champion annual events in Niagara Falls to recognize Orange Shirt Day and subsequently the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Our staff team at Niagara Parks has been proud to work alongside Brian on the planning and execution of this event, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with Brian in the future. So thank you, Brian. I would also like to acknowledge someone who has traveled a great distance to join us, Chief Fred Robbins of the Escatem First Nation. Thank you, Fred, for taking the time to be present with us today. And I would also like to recognize my fellow Niagara Parks commissioners who are in attendance today. We've already heard from the Mayor of Niagara Falls, Jim Diodati, and we also have Commissioner Ted Salsi here with us today. And I would also like to recognize Debbie Whitehouse, who is chair of the Niagara Parks Foundation, and she is with us also this morning. And thank you as well to our local dignitaries who have joined us. We have Member of Provincial Parliament for Niagara Falls, Wayne Gates, and we have Member of Parliament for Niagara Falls, Tony Baldinelli, as well as the Member of Parliament for Niagara Centre, Vance Badaway, and Member of Parliament for St. Catharines, Chris Biddle. Niagara Parks is committed to making the promise of truth and reconciliation real, and we are proud to collaborate with our Indigenous communities to support programming and initiatives that pursue this goal. Some examples of this collaboration in action include the development and maintenance of the Landscape of Nations Commemorative Memorial, annual events to honor National Indigenous Veterans Day, the development and installation of Indigenous-focused interpretive content at our sites and attractions, the celebration of Indigenous history and themes through our recently launched Explore the Niagara initiative, and working with Indigenous artists to feature their pieces at Niagara Park's retail stores. We are grateful for the opportunity to host events like this one today on the grounds that have been the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Over the course of this expansive history in Niagara, Indigenous peoples have played a pivotal role in shaping the Canada that we know today. Next, you will hear from Tim Johnson, our Senior Advisor for Heritage and Legacy at Niagara Parks, who will share more about this history and his own reflections on what today means. It is an absolute honor for me to be part of today's ceremonies with you all as we mark the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Miigwech, Nyawa, Marcy, Merci, and thank you.
Nyagawa, April, and good morning, everyone. Beginning in the 18th century, Indigenous relations with the Crown were significantly on display here in Niagara. In 1764, at the Treaty of Niagara, Sir William Johnson, Superintendent of Indian Affairs, met with 24 First Nations, including some 2,000 Indigenous representatives, to renew and strengthen relations. Numerous agreements codified by the exchange of wampum were forged during that engagement. Many of these alliances remained in place through the American Revolutionary War and into the War of 1812. In 1796, the British Indian Department had an Indian council house constructed near Fort George to maintain relations with Indigenous nations. That year and in subsequent years, significant diplomatic meetings were held. Upwards of 3,000 Indigenous people would gather at the Indian Council House to polish the silver covenant chain of friendship. During the War of 1812, all up and down the Niagara River corridor and west into the Niagara Peninsula, Indigenous nations allied with the Crown to defend their collective lands and freedoms. During battles at Queenston Heights, at Fort George, at Stony Creek, Beaver Dams, Chippewa, Lundy's Lane, Fort Erie, and at numerous other encounters along the Niagara River corridor, Indigenous allies made incredible sacrifices, some giving their last full measure to defend their peoples, while supporting their ally, the Crown, and thereby the emerging vision of a new nation called Canada. Historians have achieved consensus that were it not for the contributions of Indigenous forces during the War of 1812, Canada would be a very different place. And here in Niagara, several chapters of Canada's profound origin story were written. Following the War of 1812, however, Canadian policy shifted more strongly toward paternalism and colonialism, leading to the sweeping dispossession of Indigenous lands and resources, and creating the conditions that resulted in the country's residential school policies. We know that some 150,000 Indigenous children were placed in residential schools nationally, with thousands never returning home. The dislocations these schools caused were significantly injurious. Dislocation from family, dislocation from community and culture, dislocation from language, dislocation from safety and security, and dislocation from love. The outcome of these schools resulted in the disruption of Indigenous knowledge from one generation to the next, often leading to trauma that has traveled through several generations. In dealing with this devastating legacy, forthright advances in the humanities have been required. Orange Shirt Day, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation are such examples. Phyllis Webstad, last night, we dedicated the concert treaty, a reconciliation revelry, to you, and today we welcome and honor you on this national holiday that you and your allies inspired. Your story and your work have awakened the conscience of a country, leading to increased awareness and understanding of the truth and painful legacy of residential schools. Thank you for all you have done and continue to do. Mr. Prime Minister, by joining us today, you carry on this historic and time-honored tradition of engagement with Indigenous peoples here in Niagara. In observation of the significant nation-building history that Niagara represents, your presence is acknowledged and appreciated. Gatherings like this in Niagara are built upon powerful antecedents, founded upon shared vision, goals, and aspirations, and that seek to build a strong and healthy legacy for the future. Because of the determined and effective actions of Indigenous peoples and the government, truth and reconciliation has emerged as a national mandate. And as such, we all hold responsibility for its successful implementation. We are honored to be gathered here today and grateful for the earnest work of Brian Kahn and his allies, including the Niagara Parks Commission, for creating another story motivated by the example of Phyllis Webstad. Thank you. Now Agoa.
Very, very shortly before I ask the Prime Minister to join us, I want to take one more opportunity to acknowledge the children that are here. That's really important. Indigenous children, non-Indigenous children, you're the future. Every child truly matters. Every child matters. That's so important. I also want to say that these will be the first remarks that many of us will actually be hearing from Prime Minister Trudeau. He took the time before we gathered today to sit and listen to a survivors circle. And believe you me, with the community members present, there was no space for Prime Minister Trudeau to share any words. We made sure that we sent him away with some messages that will stay in that room. But we told him some things that he needed to hear. Now, yes, thank you. This is one dish, one spoon territory, though. This is traditional shared territory, and so I want us to make sure that we're sharing this space with the Prime Minister in a good way. It's an honor that of all the places he could have chosen to be today, he chose to be here to show respect to Phyllis Webstad and to the one dish, one spoon territories. Without further ado, please, Prime Minister Trudeau, I'd like to welcome you to the stage. Now.
Thank you, Carl. Bonjour. Good morning. I want to begin by acknowledging that this beautiful morning in this beautiful land, by this extraordinary water we gather, is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. I want to thank Gary for the song. I want to thank Grandmother Marie for the beautiful prayer and blessing and lesson, reminding us how we must remain rooted in respect and care for each other and for Mother Earth, who cares for us every day of our lives. It is so good to see so many people joining here today, so many strong, present Indigenous people reflecting on this day, grieving and healing and sharing their strength. So many non-Indigenous people as well. Thank you for coming out today, because you have an essential, or we have an essential role to play on this day. I want to thank the community leaders, Jim, April, Chris, Vance, Tony, others. Thank you for bringing the representation of your communities and your responsibilities here to this moment as well. Thank you to the Niagara Indigenous community and the grandmothers who invited me to be part of today's sunrise ceremony and the sharing circle with survivors. I heard stories this morning of the horrors and pains of residential schools that happened many years ago, in some cases generations ago, but that are every bit as present today as they ever were. As we reflect on Truth and reconciliation, it's not just a thing of the past. It has articulations today in challenges that families are facing, challenges that communities are facing, and challenges that we are all facing. We heard about the challenges of leadership, challenges of family, challenges of healing. It was an extraordinary privilege for me to be able to witness and hear and to reflect, of course, on my responsibility to make sure that all of us in this country are moving forward in the right direction together. Because this is a day for Indigenous peoples. It's a day to recognize that, yes, you are still here, you are still strong, and you are an indissociable part of the present and the future we build every day as a country. It is it is a day to remember, to grieve, to take another step along healing. But it is also a day for non-Indigenous peoples to recognize that you should not have to carry this burden alone. How many times do Indigenous peoples need to tell their stories of trauma, of loss, of pain, of grief, until we absorb those stories as non-Indigenous people and make them our own, because they too are the story of Canada, and therefore they too are the story of each of us. We talk about what happened in residential schools, where systematically, deliberately, Indigenous children were taught that they had no worth, no value to their language, to their culture, to their identity, to their traditional knowledges, to their aunties and elders' teachings. That was what residential schools did to generations of Indigenous people who carry that trauma still today. But let us not forget that every single school across this country through all those decades was also a residential school, in the way that it taught non-Indigenous people that Indigenous people had no worth, had no culture, had no language. And we carry that untruth in our learnings directly from when we were kids in school. But we carry also that learning built into the very stones of our institutions, to the systems that surround us. Lack of value, of respect, of celebration of Indigenous languages, culture, and identity is woven into the fabric of every part of this country, because for so many years it was taught the same way it was being taught in horrific ways, or attempted to be taught in horrific ways, to Indigenous kids in residential schools. So this day is not just about Indigenous people or Indigenous reconciliation. It is about truth. And that truth is, we all need to open our eyes to the truth of how Canada evolved and came to be, and how we need to make deliberate choices to undo the falsehoods and the wrongness that is part of it. But when I look, this beautiful park filled with hopeful, positive faces, strong Indigenous children, allies of every different background, as Canada represents in the best of it, we know we are on the right track. We are on the path, and it is going to take many years
But we must today and every day rededicate ourselves to that. And what a privilege to be able to do it this morning in the presence of Phyllis Webstad, whose courage in sharing her own story helped mobilize people, including all of us, across this country. I look out into this crowd, and every orange shirt is an act of solidarity with Phyllis's story and the experience of survivors. Pour ceux qui ne le savent pas, Phyllis est une survivante du système des pensionnats. Quand Phyllis avait 6 ans, elle a mis un beau chandail orange pour se rendre à son premier jour d'école. C'était un chandail orange que sa grand-mère lui avait acheté et qu'elle avait choisi. Elle avait très hâte de commencer l'école. But when Phyllis started school, her orange shirt was taken away from her. She asked for it back, but was denied. Her joy was taken from her, and so was a part of her home and the opportunity to express herself. Depuis ce jour, Phyllis n'a pas porté de vêtements orange jusqu'en 2013, quand elle a raconté son histoire lors d'une cérémonie de commémoration. As soon as Phyllis shared the story of her own orange shirt, it began to spread and spread. It resonated deeply with people. It symbolized the pain of residential schools, the way Indigenous children were stripped of their culture, their language, their connections to their families, were prevented from hearing their parents say, "I love you," and learning how to say it to their own kids years later. So people across Canada, in solidarity and in allyship, started wearing orange shirts. This is an important Indigenous-led grassroots movement. It helped build momentum towards our country establishing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And part of the reason we do it this month in September, because it was this time of year that Indigenous children would go to school, to be taken away from their homes, from their families, some to never return. In the sharing circle earlier, I heard September is a time of tears. Tears for the kids, alone and lonely in residential schools. Tears for the parents who are unable to give their kids the love, the protection, the support that they so needed. Tears from aunties, grandfathers, and grandmothers watching their kids lose that precious time with them, the precious teachings and sharings that they had learned from their aunties and grandparents going back millennia. This day fulfills a long-standing need to come together as a country to recognize the ongoing legacy of these so-called schools, especially as more and more unmarked grave sites are uncovered. The National Truth and Reconciliation Day holds space for every Canadian, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to grapple with this part of our history, to honor those who lost their lives, and to think about ways each of us can support survivors and be better allies. Reconciliation is the responsibility of every single Canadian. And we know it will take time. It's important to listen, to learn, and to move forward to not repeat the mistakes of the past. Scars don't heal overnight. And trust can take a long time to rebuild. But we will be there together every step of the way. La réconciliation, c'est la responsabilité de tous les Canadiens. C'est important de donner l'espace aux voix et aux histoires autochtones et de reconnaître la vérité. Over the past number of years, we've made historic investments in Indigenous priorities like healthcare, housing, infrastructure, ending boil water advisories, moving forward to protect language, to protect culture, to protect traditional knowledge, to lift up Indigenous identity. And that happens by putting Indigenous leadership and Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous priorities at the center of everything we do as we journey this path. We will continue to make these important investments and work with you to close all these gaps that continue to exist. But today it is an honor to stand with you all, and I'm grateful that you're sharing your stories with me, with Canadians, and now increasingly with people from all over the world. I will unfortunately be having to leave this ceremony before the end because I want to attend the national ceremony in Ottawa this afternoon. But I will hold your stories close to my heart throughout this day and throughout this year as we continue the hard work of making Canada the country we all know and hope it can be inside our hearts, but that we all have a lot of work still to do to get there. Merci beaucoup, mes chers amis. Miigwech.
Can we give it up one more time for the Prime Minister? Chief Fred Robbins will be joined on the stage by Phyllis Webstad, her grandchildren, uncles, family members. Please welcome Chief Fred of the Eskedimk Nation.
I was number 85 at the residential school. And I'm here to sing a song for you all, for the children. And it's all children that are survivors. All the children that are yet to come, and all the children that I see today. To give them strength so that as First Nations people and as people in general, we all have a future. That we all can be respectful, that we all can show kindness and compassion to one another and eliminate racism and discrimination and provide a service for our people. Salel Huya! Oh,
Thank you again to the singers. Can we thank them one more time? I just want everyone to think for a second about the power of bringing together the Great Lakes territories that we're in, and the power of the waters. We can actually hear them. Like if we stop for a second, you can hear those waters. That's how powerful they are. And then to think that our friends came from the exact opposite side of Turtle Island to bring that sacred energy and those songs together, and to play that music in our territory. It's absolutely wonderful. Speaking of wonderful, I'd like to introduce somebody that has an absolutely wonderful last name, Jennifer Dockstader, Oneida Bear Clan, the Executive Director of the Forgery Native Friendship Center. Can we please make Ms. Dockstader feel welcome? Not all of the speakers get hugs.
Yeah, well, go, brother. It is my extreme honor to be able to present this next series of speakers. Before I do, I listen a lot to our allies in the non-Indigenous community, and I need to make a couple of corrections. We are not immigrants to this territory. We have been here since time immemorial. We did not cross the Bering Straits. We were here. We are still here. And we will continue to fulfill our responsibilities to this treaty territory, as was given that responsibility from Sindawant Diso to our people. And we will help all of our allies to continue those responsibilities. I am the granddaughter of 2 residential school survivors. My grandmother, who was my best friend and helped to get me through my childhood. My grandfather, who passed away when I was 2 years old from an illness that he contracted at residential school. You see, he was also a runaway. He ran away from residential school twice before he was 12 years old. And in my mind, why would a child run away from a good place? They would not. The 3rd time he was sent home because they thought he was going to die. You see, he had developed rheumatic fever in the residential school. And that rheumatic fever is what took him at a young age, and why I am the only one of his grandchildren that he ever got to meet. My grandmother lived a long time. She lived till 86. She died 2 months before Harper's apology. And I often wonder what she would have thought of the apology. But one thing I do know for sure is all of these orange shirts, the fact that I'm able to speak today, the fact that my brother is able to speak, is what she would have wanted for us. I must also mention that the residential school era was not the end of our family's trauma. That my father and my aunt were sent to Indian day school. You see, what happened after residential school was that those same people who ran those residential schools actually were sent into our communities to run schools. And so the abuse continued. And I should also mention to you that my family, we adopted a young boy from Kenora, Red Lake to be specific. When he was 5 years old, he was part of the 60s scoop. And they told his family that he had died, so his birth family would never find him. And so in my family, I am a living example of everything that has gone wrong. And so for all of our allies who are here, please remember your compassion and never lose your compassion for my people. I love my people. But guess what? Lucky for you, I also love you. And it is with that love and that sharing that I stand here today, hopefully doing my grandmother proud and my grandfather proud. And thank you, most especially to my young ones who are here from my family. All this that I do, no matter my fear, because standing up in front of crowds is never easy, but I will share with you that I do this on your behalf so that someday it'll be easier for you and less scary. And thank you to all of the children who come. We all do this for all of you now and into the future, and your children as well. 7 generations. And on that happy note, I have the privilege of being able to welcome Chief Fred Robbins, survivor of residential school.
Wait. You know, I was meeting with the PM this morning, and he joined our circle of survivors. I wanted to speak about that, but he took that away from me already. You know, and as I'm up here drumming for you all, I look around the crowd and I think to myself, what am I going to say as I'm singing? As a survivor, you know, first of all, protocol dictates thanks you to the Haudenosaunee for allowing me to be here and speak. Thank Murray and Gary for their warm welcome, their prayers, and I also want to thank Phyllis for making this possible for me to be here today. I think it's really important when we speak about survivors. You know, I always hear the word survivors and I think about these little ones here. You know, and there was a song last night sung by this young man. I think his name was James Dillon, I believe it was. He came up here and he said he wanted to sing this song for his grandmother, who was a residential school survivor. And I think I'm pretty strong spiritually, pretty strong emotionally, and it's very rare that I get emotional. And listening to him sing this song for his grandmother reminded me of my grandmother. And I got emotional because they told me their story of growing up as a survivor. And when I first left the residential school at the age of 11, 12, they dropped me off at Alkali Lake in front of the church. And before they dropped me off, they dressed me up in brand new clothes. I looked like a shiny object to play with, you know, when you dangle a fishing hook for a fish and the fish come after it, that's what I looked like. I stuck out like a sore thumb in my community because almost every other child in my community was wearing hand-me-downs. They were wearing clothes from their big brothers, from their uncles. Every one of them had patches all over their clothes. And here I am standing in front of the church with brand new jeans, shoes, brand new shirt, brand new jean jacket. And as I'm standing there, I'm wondering to myself, why'd they bring me here? Talk about displacement. I had no clue where I was. Not a clue. I never grew up on a reservation. I grew up in a residential school and with my aunties and uncles away from Alkali Lake. And when they dropped me off in front of that church, I had no clue where to go. I didn't know which way was home, which way was up, which way was down. I was so displaced in my own community. Finally, my uncle comes over and I'm standing there in front of the church. I'm wondering whether I should run or hide and then he comes over and he tells me, "Are you Fred?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Well, come with me. Mom wants to meet you." Nobody else talked to me, nobody else I knew, so I followed him. And I went to my grandmother's house and I sat down on the couch and my grandmother comes walking out of the room and she stops and she stares at me for the longest time. It seemed like an eternity. And then she said, "Fred, is that you?" I'm like, "Yes." And then she smiles and comes over and gives me a hug. But I was still displaced. I still didn't know my grandmother. I still didn't know this family I had walked into. And to this day, I think there's still a picture in that house of when I came home from that residential school, sitting on a couch. And I'm sitting on a couch reading an Archie comic. I didn't take off my coat because I was thinking, I'm not staying here. I don't know this place. I was so displaced in my own community, in my own family. It was so surreal. And it was a feeling of being dropped off in a world that you never grew up in. And it was many years later. Well, not many, to be honest. It was 2 years. 2 years later, I moved out from my mom and dad. I moved out because I didn't know these two. I didn't know who my dad was. I didn't know who my mom was. And to be honest, I got sick and tired of being beaten on by an alcoholic father who himself was sexually assaulted at these residential schools, just as I was beaten to a pulp at these residential schools, just like I was. And was told he was going to be a worthless Indian living on SA for the rest of his life, just like I was. And it wasn't until many years later that he found the courage to sober up after rolling a brand new GMC 1986 truck, barrel roll, flipping, tossing and turning inside this truck. And finally sobering up in the hospital with over 50 stitches, no teeth, a broken shoulder, many lacerations, bumps and bruises everywhere. And my mom, who was going into the RCMP at the time, told the wrecker, "Don't touch that truck, whatever you do." So I happened to be there when we picked him up. And the look on his face when he saw that truck, he wouldn't even acknowledge the fact that he was inside it. That truck was like somebody, like King Kong grabbed it, crushed it up and tossed it away. The only thing you could see is where they had to use the jaws of life to cut him out. That was the only thing you could see into that car. And as we got back into the car, my mom looks at him and says, well, when are you going to stop? And that was the day he quit drinking. But I'd still moved out because I never knew who my parents were. I grew up without mom and dad. I grew up without grandparents. But now I can say my grandmother is Anastasia Chelsea and Lottie Kalelst. My grandfather is Duncan Robbins, Howard Paul, and on the Chelsea side, Patlick Chelsea. We say Patlick, but his real name was Patrick because we couldn't say the T sound, so they called him Patlick. You know, I can proudly say that because they too were residential school survivors. And when I think about surviving, I also have to think about how many other people out there have their stories and have yet to even speak about it. When I look into this crowd and I look at how many First Nations are here, I ask myself, they each have their own story. I walk down a street in Vancouver on Hastings and I see the First Nations on that street and I wonder, have they had an opportunity to tell their story? I think to myself, as First Nations people, I am sick and tired of being resilient. We are a strong people. We have pride and we have to stand that back up again. Acknowledge the people that we see more than a nod or a handshake. We have to do more together. When I speak, I tend to bounce around a bit. You know, forgive me for that. But as a survivor, I really think that we're all in different spaces in our healing journey. Don't think that if you speak to a First Nations that they can speak about their story without shedding a tear. I was sexually assaulted. I was beaten. I was strapped. I was humiliated. This all happened at a residential school. And I'm getting a wave I see there, so no, I'm just kidding. But this happened at a residential school, and I told this to my friends. My soccer buddies, not one of them were First Nations. They're all white. And they all looked at me and said, "You went to residential school?" "Yeah, I went to residential school." "Where?" They didn't even know there was a residential school in the city of Williams Lake. And they were my age. This history is so well hidden. So well hidden. Just recently, 2 years ago, we started a movement. I say we as in everyone that's here with this orange shirt. And this is where reconciliation is going to begin. If you see discrimination and racism, stand up to it. Because nobody did for us as residential school survivors. It was beaten into us that we weren't worthy. It was beaten into us that we don't deserve anything. I was in grade 5 at the residential school at 150 Mile School. And it was funny because we started learning a bit about history. Nootka, Fraser, you know, this guy that got lost and happened to land at Newfoundland. And we learned about the history of how the First Nations people would help one another. You know, we saw this guy coming in on the ship and he was starving. He'd been lost at sea for I don't know how long. And as part of our culture, if you're two-legged, we support you. We stand you up. We give you strength. We provide for you. So when Columbus landed, we gave him food. We provided him with sustenance. As First Nations people, that's how we're taught. And when he was ready to go home, we filled up his ship with furs, with water, with fish, with, you know, as First Nations people, when you come to my house and you visit with me, I'm going to send you off with some food to get you to your next location, wherever you need to be, so that you have a full stomach when you get there. So that's what we did with Columbus. And when he landed at home, he said, "Look at my bounty, Queen. Look at everything that I've brought forward for you. They're just giving it away." And, you know, it's sad to say, it's really sad to say that that was taken from us at these residential schools. There are very few cultural people left out there that would provide you with that service when you go into their home. You know, growing up, I had 2 daughters. My first daughter, I wasn't ready for. I was too young. As a residential school survivor, I didn't know how to be a dad. I didn't know how. Everything I learned was from this residential school. She was 3.5 years old. She got up, she filled up her cereal, she grabbed the gallon of milk and was trying to pour the milk into this bowl of cereal. As little as she was, she spilt the milk all over the table. The cereal was everywhere. I scooped her up and I said, "That's wrong." And I put her over my knee and I was about to start spanking her. Just then my wife happened to see this. She's like, "What are you doing?" She spilt the milk, so she needs to be spanked, and it's wrong. Well, clean it up. You don't have to beat her. She's 3.5 years old. I'm very grateful for my wife. She wasn't just the mother of our children, she was the father. She was my pillar of strength, my weakest moments and my weakest times. She forgave me for everything that I had done, all the wrongs. She forgave me with unconditional love, and I love her for that. I found a way to thrive as a residential school survivor. I found a way and a large part of that was because of my wife. And I want to thank you for that. My wife wasn't a residential school survivor, she's a day school survivor. And she's quite the strong woman. She's learned a lot, so much from her mom. You know, her mom was a residential school survivor, but she found her way through sun dancing, through ceremonies. She found out who she was again. And she taught me a lot about how to love unconditionally the children that you have. She opened up a daycare in 1979. And she ran that daycare for as long as she could. At the age of 66 years old, the province and the federal government came in with these new regulations. You had to have your early childhood education development certificate. Otherwise, you can't work with children under the age of 3. So at the age of 66, she went back to school and got her ECE so that she could work with children. And to this day, she'd probably still be working there. Unfortunately, we lost her 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And, we had her memorial this year. We put up her headstone. And it was a small ceremony just between the family. We had a celebration of life and a celebration of everything that she has taught us. And my wife, she's taken on that role now. And it was interesting how much work she did for us. Everything that she did for us. We'd go out hunting, we'd come home with a mule deer buck. We'd bring it to her place, I'd skin it, gut it out, get everything, quarter it, put it on the table, and she'd be ready there sharpening her knives. You know, my daughters, they helped her. But we're getting pretty tired by the end of the day, and she's like, just leave it, go home and rest. Just leave it, I'll do it, go home and rest. I couldn't believe the amount of work that it took after she had left us. A year later, we brought home another deer. This time she wasn't there, so we had to work the meat ourselves. And it took us a day and a half just to get all of that meat quartered up and packaged and in the freezer. And she used to do this on her own. You know, so children, look to your grandparents. People in the crowd, know that your grandparents are there for you. Show the resilience. Show them that you're willing to learn, that you're willing to do something to make this world a better place. And I just want to finish off with a short story about the Prime Minister this morning. You know, I was speaking about my leadership role when I was a young man, stepping into becoming a chief, and I went and I spoke to my grandparents. And I told them, I'm not ready to be a chief. How do I speak to these great political bodies? You know, I might meet a minister, I might meet a mayor, I might meet other leadership, I might meet the national chief, I might. And I was really worried about how I would speak to them, how I would come across. And my grandfather, who is a World War II veteran, just turns over across the table and looks at me and says, remember, their shit is brown too. So on that note, reconciliation is possible. As a leader, I'm looking for restitution. I want restitution for our people. You know, I was sitting there with the mayor and I said, you know, I come here as an honored guest, but I see no First Nations memorabilia anywhere here. You know, and I think it's valuable to stand up to First Nations people as part of the reconciliation movement, to honor them. Because I don't know the history here, but if these falls were in my backyard, this would be sacred land. And, you know, there are many things across Canada, so many things that have to happen. As Murray Sinclair said, it took them 150 years to tear us down as First Nations people. It may take us another 150 years to build us back up. And that has to start today. So I look to everyone in the crowd today and I ask you to stand up to racism, discrimination. Stand up to it. Don't allow it to happen. Because it could happen to you someday. And I can guarantee you a First Nations person would stand up for you. So I just want to, again, thank the people here of this great land. Thank the mayor for the welcome. And thank everyone behind the scenes to make this possible. Because this is a lot of work. And I just want to, again, from my heart, say thank you. From the Eskedum people, from the Secwepemc Nation, thank you for honoring us today. Kuksham.
Mayor Jim Diodati, you have two friendship centers that share territory. We'll be happy to get that honoring throughout Niagara Falls. You don't have to do that alone. It is my extreme honor at this point to welcome Phyllis Webstad and all 19 of her family and guests.
It's been a dream of my son and I and our family to come to Niagara Falls. So when I heard the falls were turning orange, I told my son we should go there and witness that. So we look forward to tonight. It'll be turning orange for 15 minutes on the hour, starting at 8. 1 minute equals 10,000 children. 15 minutes equals 150,000 children. So we've come to witness that tonight. And I've asked everyone to come and stand with me today. We had a book come out, Beyond the Orange Shirt Story, last year. And I thought I was going to make so much money on it that I was going to bring 15 of my family to Niagara Falls with me. And we fell short about 50,000 or so. So the Orange Shirt Society stepped up and said, this is an intergenerational trip to show the world that residential schools affect the generations. I want to introduce my family. My grandmother's first marriage was arranged. And when I was talking to her about that once, she said, I didn't know that I could say no. And I told her, well, thank God you didn't, because we wouldn't be here. And she just laughed. My grandmother lived to be 100. The woman that bought me the orange shirt, she passed in January of 2019. So 2 of Granny's children are here today. My eldest aunt from Granny's first marriage, Teresa. And Granny from her first marriage had 5 children. The 3 have passed on. The 2 left are my Aunt Teresa and my mother Rose. Granny had another husband and she had 7 children. None of those children, or Granny's other children, are here. They couldn't. My aunt. Oh my! He's pulling my hair. It's like, what? There's a bug in there. So my Aunt Agnes couldn't be with us. And one of the intergenerational impacts is I was a young mom. I lived with my granny until I was 10. Then I went to live with my aunt. And in grade 8, I was pregnant and I had my son, and my aunt helped raise him as well. So my son, Jeremy. And his wife is here as well. She's over there. I know she doesn't like crowds and people, but I'm so proud of them. When I was on my book tour in 2018, I was looking at a picture of my family and I realized something. I have a saying that life can be understood backward but must be lived forward. And I was looking at that picture and I realized that for the first time in 5 generations, children in my family, my grandchildren, are being raised by their mother and their father. Granny, Mom, me, and my son didn't have that because of residential school. So my grandchildren, this is Haley, she's 4. And this is Adam, he's 6. And Evie, she's 2, my son is holding her. My oldest grandson, Blake, I won't say how old you are. And Mason, he's 13. I never did have any more children, even though I wanted to. So I'm so proud of my son and his wife. The future is bright. There is great hope for the future. I got them drums to come here, so they were drumming, some of them for the first time. And my grandson seems to have the beat when Chief Fred hits the drum. He's right in unison with Fred. And he just likes to hit it. And the other night, I heard my eldest grandson sing for the first time. I almost cried when I heard that. So we are getting back our culture. We have 4 generations of Granny's family here. So I'm Granny's grandchild. Cousin Amber is in the crowd there. It was too much for her to be up here. And we have cousin Sarah. Granny's great-grandchildren. We have Larissa. And Granny's great-great-grandchildren are not only my grandchildren, they're Granny's great-great, but also Aubrey. So 4 generations of Granny's family are here. And, okay, who else do we have here? Before I forget, I want to talk about my vest. My perfume today is called Smoked Deer Hide. Yeah. And I was holding my grandson there because he was cold, and he said, "Grandma, you smell like fish camp." It's like, yeah, that's my perfume today. But I got this vest made. I've never had a vest in my life. This here is my favorite flower, the lily. This here is my shirt with the 3 beads on it because my shirt, when Granny bought it, when I chose it, it had 3 buttonholes, like, and then there was a lace laced through it. And the little orbs are me and my grandchildren and my son's birthstones. And on the side is a cross with blue orbs. That was Granny's favorite color, was blue, and to honor her, she was Catholic. And I used to be ashamed of that and have a resentment that Granny was Catholic, but by the time that she passed, I learned to respect her and to realize and honor that that was her strength because of what had happened to us in all of our history. And that's not my choice today. I know my eldest aunt is Catholic, and I respect that. And also with us is my daughter-in-law's parents, Ron and Elsie Murphy. Yeah, we wanted them to come as well to take part in this, and the children are a handful, as you can see, so it's good for my daughter-in-law to have her mother and her father here to help with that. And also, I want to thank Brian, Brian Kahn, and the history of the falls turning orange. I'm not quite sure what year, about 2-3 years ago. I haven't gotten the chance to tell Brian this story, but I got these pictures. A lot of people send me pictures, and it's like, that looks like the Niagara Falls, and who's this guy? And he kept sending me these pictures in different ways. With, you know, he has the mustache and the beard, and it's like, who is this weirdo? Like, oh, but the falls look pretty cool. And anyway, we started chatting on Facebook, and I told him about how that was on our dream list to come to Niagara. So Brian, the first year, appeared before the illumination committee and asked them to turn the falls orange, but it was too late to really tell anybody about it. So that was him all happy taking selfies at the falls by himself that he sent me. And then I think the next year he told people so more people would come. But last year, with the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, he no longer has to appear before the Illumination Committee. They said that they'll automatically do it every year, that he doesn't have to do that. Yeah. And I have, every year at the Orange Shirt Society, we have an art contest for our design for that year. It's open to elementary and high school only, so no professional, people. It's what the students can create. And because we're always being asked, what's your design this year? What's your design? So we had this contest, and Talco pays, one of the prize is we pay them for the design, and they get to come and spend that time with me. So our contest opens in October, I believe, right, Sarah? Yeah, okay. And we receive submissions, and they have a description of their artwork. That's all we look at. We don't look at what grade, what nationality, what their name is. We just look at the design and what they said. That's how we make the decision. And this year's design winner is Geraldine Petalbas. And I can open, her design was inspired by Tecum Loops 215, and the children on the bottom are the shoes of the children rising up and into the eagle. So for me, the eagle signifies that they're watching, they're protecting, and the children. So Geraldine was this year's winner. So her and her parents came to be with us to spend the day. There they are, waving. Yeah, so Gukshjam, thank you for being with us. Yeah, I think that's all that I didn't forget anybody. Oh, Larissa, did I say Larissa? Okay. All right, because as you can see, I can't do this by myself. From the very beginning, I've always maintained that Orange Shirt Day is divinely guided, that something is at play that's making this happen, and I really believe it's the ancestors, the Creator, and the children that are missing in the unmarked graves and the burials, and my family that stand with me. So with that, Gukjem, thank you for being here, and it's been an awesome day. We're going to be drumming down by the falls tonight, and I just, yeah, somebody just did this, and I understand what that means. We are Shawetm or Shushwap. We are also the next language, I guess, category is Salish. And under Salish, there's interior and coastal Salish. We are interior Salish, and like Vancouver, Musqueam area, they're coastal Salish. And their way of saying thank you and giving honor is by putting up the hands. So that's what it means to me when this is done. So I've borrowed that, our coastal Salish brothers, to say Gukjem. So Gukjem, thank you for all being here, and I look forward to enjoying some of the sun. I'm a bit cold, so Gukjem, thank you.
Before everybody goes, we've been asked to ask everyone just to take a moment and to remember the survivors of residential school, the 150,000 people that attended, the children that were lost, and just to have a moment of silence. Please join me. Thank you. That was 215 seconds of silence. I'm going to ask Gary Parker and Fred to share a song right now.
Just a brief history while I wait for my other drummer to get up here. This song, the words to this song is, good Creator God, help us, we are very pitiful. The second verse to this song is, good Creator God, thank you for helping us be strong. This song was sung to me by an elder from our nation. And he explained this song to me as a song that was used for healing, to ask for healing. And when you receive it, to thank the good Creator for it. And he also said that he wanted me to sing it. I hadn't sung it for quite some time. I'd sing it in ceremony only. But most recently, due to COVID, I started singing it, and people are asking me to sing it now everywhere. And we sung this song this morning at the ceremony. And the song was supposed to be sung by Gary today, but he asked me to sing this song for all of you. So I'm hoping Gary will pick up a lead. Right, Gary? You don't need to take your hat off if you have an eagle feather in it, but if you don't have an eagle feather, please remove it. The reason why we do that is so that the spirits that come, they can see you, see your face. If you're wearing a hat, they can't see who you are. Hey,
Big time Nyawakoa to our singers. We our last order of business is we started off in a good way with a traditional opening. So I'm going to ask Grandma Marie to join me in just a second. I want to let each and every one of you know that you were invited to the Niagara Regional Native Center powwow tomorrow at 11 a.m. Grand entry is at 11. Get there a little bit early. There's going to be a bit of a crowd that's coming. So our guest of honor will be Phyllis Webstad. So one more time, give it up to Phyllis Webstad. Give it up to yourselves for coming. You've been a beautiful crowd. What do they say? Cold hands, warm heart. Bit of a chilly day today, so good job, everybody. All right, without further ado, I'd like to ask Grandma Marie Jones to come and to offer a traditional closing address.
Nyawagoa. So I'm not going to repeat everything that I did in the beginning, but just know in our minds we can do that. And what they say is the business that was laid before us has concluded now. So now we will all go our separate ways, and the way we brought all of our minds together as one, our words were braided and intertwined our minds. And you are now released and go your own ways. And may I ask that all the love and the kindness that you experienced here that went on in this sacred space, may that stay in your heart forever, and your journey home be safe. Nyawe, Danito. Ganalunkwa, I love you.